got a lot of people in my ward asking questions about it. And going on Facebook all pissed off.
So no more glass, right? I mean,
As of right now.
it's confusing to change things.
I'm going to go by digital time. Okay, 1 o'clock. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the Green Sustainability Committee together. Is there a motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting? All in favor? Aye. Okay, we have one topic for discussion today. We don't have legislation, but the reason why I asked for this meeting was because a lot of my residents have brought it up to me that they're very concerned about the fact that there's been some big changes in the recycling program. Most notably, we are no longer accepting glass. So I would like Chris Luddle, I invited Chris Luddle, the Deputy Service Director, and Marcy Kress from the Summit Reworks to give us a little bit more information about what has happened in that area, both locally and nationally. I know the Beacon Journal, well, I'm giving them a compliment, they're not here, did a nice story in the paper, but that doesn't mean that some of the council people might have some good questions and good points to make, and hopefully this discussion will lead to other possibilities about that situation if they exist. And so I guess maybe we could start with Chris. Would you like to just sort of update us on what's happening with our recycling program?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, members of council. I'd like to thank Marcy Kress for coming today from Summit Reworks. She's going to give us a little presentation on they're countywide, okay? It's not just Akron what they do and what their educational things are. I think we've all heard in the recent months that the change in the recycling industry, China was taking most of all our recyclables and they were taking everything, okay? So unfortunately our contamination rate, not even with the glass, is 35, 36%. That's yard waste, that's clothing, that's the bags. The biggest thing is we have such an automated system, and I don't know if you've ever been out there, but some of you have, and I appreciate you going out there, is when it comes off the belt, these plastic bags, mostly from grocery stores, are coming loose and are getting stuck between the belts, okay? So then it becomes a manual operation. They have to pull the bag out, whether it's a trash bag. And for years, when we started recycling, people got the clear plastic bags, they'd buy them and they'd put all their stuff in it and they'd throw it in there. Well, now we're getting to the point where our system, and it's been a problem for a few years, and we've been trying to educate people, throw it in your recycle can loose, okay? So before you is a piece of educational material that we're putting out again. We constantly put these things out to our residents. We appreciate you guys promoting this at your ward meetings, but I'm going to let Marcy just talk about a few things, and then we'll field questions as we get them from the committee. Thank you.
Sounds good. Marcy?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, member of council. I think I'm working now. Is that correct? First of all, I appreciate this opportunity. We were involved with that initial article from the Beacon. It was by recommendation of our board of trustees, and we had the opportunity to have a piece that spoke to the changes in the recycling market and specifically how they affect not only the city, but of course the county and quite honestly the region. So the focus of our education has been on what we call material recovery facility sheds, or MRF sheds. And that education component is based on any community that takes their material to a MRF, or material recovery facility, should have similar messages on what can be recycled. And our efforts have been really directed toward working with not only our local communities, but also our regional solid waste districts who utilize the same facilities. And of course, a number of those changes did occur because of the market changes in China, but the truth is contamination is trying to work to get that information out to the residents to not only benefit the recycling stream itself, but to clear up any confusion or explain reasons why some of those changes have occurred. So our approach has always been the regional approach. I think going forward, we should always focus on what the facility can recover and market, and our education message should be based on those type of factors. And that's really why many of these changes are being passed down from the facilities to the communities that utilize them. So it's a general statement that we're working on, but I would entertain any questions you might have on this. Of course, our job as the Solid Waste Authority of Summit County is to answer any questions from our residents, our communities, our businesses. And that's why we're here as a resource for those type of questions.
Okay. Any members of council would like to ask a question? Mr. Cameron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is in regards to the, I'll call it a flyer that Chris Little passed out. Now, all of Summit County has the same restrictions in regards to the recycling, or is each city different, or township?
Each city is a little bit different, okay? We work through waste management, so waste management controls our MRF. So we're at their mercy. So wherever they're marketing their materials to. Okay, so they were sending a lot to China, like I said, and they were taking everything, and then China stopped. So now I believe some of their things are going to Vietnam, okay? And recently we've heard that out in Wapakoneta, Ohio, is building a brand new facility for cardboard and paper, which will help tremendously. Obviously, shipping it. We would take these things, cardboard and paper, and we would create these huge bundles, okay? So if you can imagine a pallet, 4 foot by 4 foot and 4 foot tall, it would all be bundled together. Well, that pallet could sit for a month or two and then on a barge and over there. Well, now they're saying if it's older than like 6 weeks, they don't want it. It's contaminated, okay? So they took it. So just send it to Wapakoneta will help a lot, and they're building that new facility. But we are probably different than maybe Cauga Falls or a neighboring community, people that don't use waste management. We are at waste management's mercy when here's what we can take and here's what we can't take, here's what we can market, here's what we cannot market. So we may not be the same across county with every municipality.
No, that was my question. I just wanted to see if waste management was, I'll use the word, in control of all of Summit County in regards to recycling, because obviously I look at this paper and it says Summit Reworks. So that's what pops in my head. So
if I may speak to that.
Yes.
Also, it is based on the MRF. So whatever community close by is going to the waste management MRF, we have 3 in our general region. We have 1 in Akron, we have 1 in Twinsburg, and we have 1 in Lorain County, Elyria. I can't remember exactly where that one is, but we have a number of the same MRFs, and we are in conversation with all of those MRFs, and they have similar markets.
Okay.
So although communities have specific capabilities per their contracts, they are utilizing the same MRFs. And those restrictions, it takes some time to pass that message along and to make sure everybody's saying the same thing, but that's what we're in the process of now. Okay. Is the Cauga Falls and City of Akron are the only 2 municipalities who have city-run programs for their trash and their recycling. All other communities in Summit County are a private-public relationship or an exclusive hauler contract. So Akron and Falls are unique in that sense.
All right, thanks. Another question is, this flyer that I'm looking at, is this mostly put together from the City of Akron, or do you have input in regards to that too?
We work with all of our communities. I believe our logo is on there. We worked with the city several years ago to include cartons on the education piece.
Okay. As
markets change, items can be added also, and I remember working very closely with the city when cartons were added to the list of materials. But as we provide education, the materials listed on this flyer are consistent with the material that we provide as well.
Okay. All right, thanks.
We were actually taking all of Toledo's recyclables here, and their contamination was so great that Waste Management stopped their contract with Toledo. So the city of Toledo no longer brings their recyclables to here. But since it was our MRF, we would generate revenue from Toledo, which we do not get anymore.
Other committee members? Mr. Kilby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you for coming in and educating us a little bit. So, I didn't catch MERC, Material Recovery, and what's the C stand for?
Material Recovery Facility, MRF. It's a MRF.
Oh, MRF, okay,
Yes.
all right. I thought it said, okay, MRF, okay. Facility. Okay, a couple questions. You talk about contamination. It's just, do you mean the wrong kind of stuff in there, or is it just like the cans aren't cleaned out enough of food waste? I mean, is it both? I mean,
Most is like, you'll see big chunks of wood, we'll see,
Yeah.
we'll see some building materials.
trying to get rid of stuff.
We've seen, I can go on and on, railroad spikes.
Oh, yeah.
I was out the other day looking at some things, and a recycle can was just full of leaves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clearly that we don't put yard waste in them, but some of them are. They're clothing, that type of thing.
Right, so do you think the average household that this is coming from is, do you think those people are purposely doing this or just inadvertently because they don't know what is recyclable? What do you,
I really can't answer
Can't.
why they put it in
yeah,
there,
I would
no.
think, I mean, I used to put steel in there, you know, I thought that was recyclable. You could take it down to scrapyard, but you said there was railroad spikes. That doesn't surprise me because I used to do that, but I guess no longer. So,
We're looking at a grant to get some boots on the ground to go out and do more education. So, you know,
Yeah.
we've went to all the automatic packers so the drivers don't get out of the trucks anymore, okay?
I understand.
But if we can get some boots on the ground to go out there on the days, and we're trying to do some, right now we're doing some research on what wards, because we pick up by ward on different days, and then we're trying to identify which trucks and which neighborhood
Right.
has got the most contamination to try to get more education out in those neighborhoods first.
right. So how are we educating them? I mean, are these being sent out or, I mean, most people, they just want to get that their $1.50 discount, really. And some people.
Well, we'll
are-
tag the can, and then we'll put something on the door, and then when they contact us, we'll further educate them.
Yeah.
But if it's time and time again where they're contaminated, we will pull their can.
Right.
And then we get their attention, then they call.
Okay, so what are they getting, like $2 off on their trash bill now in Akron?
It's $2.50.
$2.50, okay. How, I mean, I try to clean these cans out. Sometimes there's some stuff that's tough to get out, you know? It's like, does it really all have to be thoroughly washed with soap and everything? Or, I mean, it'd be nice, but,
Rinsing's
most
fine.
people,
They
they
don't have to be
take the time
washed
to
with
do
soap,
that,
just
huh?
if you rinse them out would be great.
yeah, that's what I do, but, anyways, well, this is, are we mandated by the EPA to do recycling? We don't have to do this if we don't want to?
No, sir.
There's
But it's
cities
for
that
the
don't
environment.
recycle. I know we're trying to do our part, I understand, but it seems like it's, I know we're not making any money off of it, are we? I mean, it's like we were for a while when.
Right now, there's not much of a market, no, sir.
Yeah, the other question just came back to my mind. I know there's a paper cardboard recycling place up in Monroe Falls. What's it called? I forget. It starts with S or something. You know, right there on Route 91, there's I think it's a cardboard recycling. You guys know about this?
Yes.
It's been there for years.
It's right by North River
Why
Road,
can't
yes.
we take our cardboard and paper there? Because I know people that are scrappers, not only scrap metal, they scrap paper. If they get
Yes.
enough of it, they'll take it up there and get some money for it. So why can't we do that?
Well, that's why we have the MRF. Everything goes into one can, it goes to one facility, then they separate it for us.
Right.
And then they market it,
Okay.
okay? To have our residents take their...
I know, I'm talking about why can't we, once it comes to the MERC, take
would-
it up there and sell it to them? Or they could come and get
I
it?
think it would add another step to handling the material. They market it for us, yes.
Okay, all right, so, all right then, thank you.
If I may add an education opportunity that also exists is explaining why certain materials cannot go into that MRF. So specifically, scrap metal is a very common question we get. And if residents understand how materials identified in that MRF and how it's processed, it also really helps benefit on why, although the intention is good to recycle the metal,
Right.
why it is not a good idea to put that type of material in
Yeah.
your bin.
Yeah, one thing, a little bit off the subject, but, you know, you see all these people dumping, I mean, I'm not talking about recyclable, but okay, look, down on Eastwood Avenue, down by the tracks, they just cut all that brush off and ride by there, people throwing couches and bags of garbage. I mean, people clean out garages, and where do they take it? I mean, where can you take a pickup load of stuff if you want to get rid of it? Where do you go? I mean, you drive way out to Brimfield or something? I mean, we
Well, I
should
mean,
have something.
we offer in our monthly
I know
bill
you can- I'm
twice a
talking about
year.
people that are doing it for a living. There's people, if you look in the classified ads, you'll see somebody hauling, cleaning out garages and things like that. You know, and you used to have Hardy Road. You could, I did this 20 years ago when I was unemployed, cleaning out garages. I went up to Hardy Road, it was 10 or 15 bucks. You could dump a pickup truck load. Now, where would they go now? And it's like, it's a real dilemma, like, you know, up at Rolling Acres, they're doing all that dumping there and a number of other places, and you know about them, but why don't we have a place where we could charge people a nominal fee, where they could dump a load of, clean out a garage or a house and dump that stuff, whether it's building material or whatever. I don't know, where do they take it?
So
I mean,
we are aware of a few facilities in Summit County that will take construction and demolition debris.
who does that?
So that is down in Norton and Barberton. One is
Yeah, that's
Summit
a long
C
way
and
from
D.
Akron for,
Well, that's construction demolition
I know,
specifically.
I know.
So
Well-
for municipal solid waste, the two facilities that we are aware of that will take residential loads are the Oakwood facility up toward Cleveland and also hauling
Yeah.
it down to a landfill,
these
American
people aren't
landfill.
gonna take it there, that's the point, you know, so,
Sure.
all right.
It might be the fact that if they take it to the landfill, they have to pay.
Yeah, well, I think if it was a nominal amount and it was convenient, they would. I mean, but, you know,
We've struggled with this illegal dumping for years,
know,
even
I know.
when we
Well,
owned Hardy Road, unfortunately.
Yeah, it used to be Hardy Road. When did we close it? About 15 years ago or something like that? Something like that. I don't know. Okay, that's all right. No matter.
Councilman Fusco's been waiting patiently, and other...
Thank you. Just real quick, thank you for coming down this afternoon, appreciate it, and I know a lot of my colleagues here are willing to help in terms of getting the message out. Two quick questions for you. Number one, I didn't get a copy of that, but didn't it pay for us to maybe get this and get this so it can have the stickiness on the back so we could put it on our trash receptacles?
Our new
Would that make
cans,
sense?
our new cans, we are putting them on there.
Yeah, but it seems like, I mean, I got an old can, I guess, well, a lot of us have old cans. There's a joke in there somewhere. But, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yes.
we could just stick it on there, and then that might help us in terms of just an idea.
We've
to
thought
throw
about
out
doing
there.
that. We've also thought about putting something, get into our residents to put in their kitchens right by their can.
That's something else.
like
Yeah,
that, too.
yeah, absolutely.
Something they could put there so they could recognize, so it goes in that before it goes in the other.
And that's what we do. But,
So
but
we're
it seems
looking
like on
at
the can itself might
Yeah.
help. I don't know, just to throw
Absolutely.
it out. And secondly, we may have talked about this, but we could talk offline afterwards. But a lot of our stores out there sell this stuff to deep fry turkeys, and I used to do that. And the only way you can get rid of the grease is through your the stove facility. And so, you know, I'm afraid to ask what others do with their grease, and I'd like to work on that in terms of finding out, because I know that there's, you know, people advertise and so on. I'm sure they deep fry their turkeys and other things.
I mean, I could have somebody come like Tom Smith or Brian Gresser, they could tell you where they're putting their grease,
Exactly right.
which
So
we don't want it there.
if there's something that we can, you know, perhaps do in a more of a timely fashion, like in November, it just makes sense. And we could talk offline. I don't want to take any more of the committee's time. Thank you.
I have a couple more questions. First of all, there's only 2 municipalities that are collecting, have their own recycling program.
Yes.
Has Cuyahoga Falls also stopped collecting glass?
I don't believe they have stopped at this point. I know glass was under a review.
It's under review,
I
okay.
believe so.
Okay. Where municipalities do this, is this always a moneymaker? Do sometimes municipalities see this as a sort of a social obligation to recycle and are willing to, even if it's problematic to get rid of some of the materials are willing to take it on, or is it always something that has to be self-sustaining?
I'm not sure. I know as a solid waste district, we advise communities who have contracts to look at those type of factors. The opportunity for diversion is still available in many communities. We are not maximizing what can be collected at the curbside. So I think evaluating the time to collect material that might be more marketable than the contamination material, something we would guide communities to evaluate. But those contracts are something that are decided municipally, and those decisions are made by the communities. We are here to advise on where we think the opportunity exists, and to, of course, increase diversion and to favor any kind of scenario where they could, if it's a revenue-making opportunity, we would advise them on how to get increased materials that might have a higher value. It's more of an education component from our solid waste district side.
Okay. So at this point, Cuyahoga Falls has not cut their glass recycling. They are now accepting glass.
Not yet, but they're looking into it.
They're
I heard.
looking into
Yes.
it. Do they also have a contract with Waste Management?
Yes.
Okay.
But to give you an example about,
yeah.
just let's take the paper and the cardboard and the phone books. If we would take in a ton of that this week, of paper, when we take that to the MRF and then it goes to the recycle, if we
Yeah.
took that to the landfill, it would be $43 a ton. So everything that we can recycle that's not contamination, even the little bit we generate, is less we're spending over at the other, okay? And it's not going to landfill, because everything that goes to landfill, then we have to pay $43 a ton.
Okay. So we're trying to stay out from it being out from under a financial burden.
Well, plus it's going to landfill. It's not going to landfill, it's getting recycled. So it's good for the environment.
Okay. How long is our contract with Waste Management?
I am not sure of that.
Okay. Do we ever consider working with a different company?
We have, I mean, we rebid it, and then we put an RFP out, and then they bid on it, and they were, I think Republic has had it before.
Okay. Because, my residents aren't very happy about the glass is kind of like one of the first things that all of us recycled. I remember as a kid picking up pop bottles, and making some money off of that, and buying baseballs. And, we all have that kind of recycling connection to the glass part. So a lot of people are very disappointed.
I guess when we were young, when you had pop bottles, you took them back to the grocery store, and they took them back, and then
Exactly.
they washed them out and then they reused them. That doesn't happen
Yeah.
anymore.
Well, I don't know. Actually, I don't really know what they did. They took them.
They took them back, and they took them
I was
back.
10 years old, so I don't really remember, but I know they gave me some money, and I bought baseball cards and baseballs.
Coke would
Yeah.
probably wash them out and reuse them again.
Yeah. So now we don't have that.
No. And we used to drink out of drinking fountains too back in the day.
Okay.
Old people like me,
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay. Is it possible that another contractor might have more of a commitment or ability to recycle glass? For the future, is that something that we ought to have as an expectation, that we want a contractor who's going to be able to do this?
I can just speak, if I may speak to the local MRFs, the market that we should always educate on is what the local facilities can market. There are opportunities in the southern part of the state for different materials, and they will vary slightly throughout the nation, but the majority of the nation struggles with a glass market. And the reason for that is specifically what you mentioned. It is not that glass is not recyclable, it's the means in which we collect it. So if glass is all clean, regular glass, no labels, no food, it hasn't been broken, it can be recycled infinitely. However, our process locally for our facilities is that it goes through a material recovery facility where it breaks apart and it falls through the system and gets caught into other materials. So I think if you found a system to collect only glass, you would still have to identify an end user for that. And although we have tried, and there were several locally a few years ago, Strategic Materials out of Cleveland, it was not economical to maintain that system. So I believe markets can grow in this scenario, but we are not aware of any local markets for glass.
So there were some attempts by local government. Was it the government that provided these alternatives, or was it nonprofits, or?
The example I'm aware of is the Medina County Solid Waste District, our sister from Medina County. They ran
Okay.
a material recovery facility, and they had an igloo collection throughout their county for glass only. And that program came to end several years ago.
Okay.
So I believe markets can be brought up through these challenges, and we, as a solid waste district, are trying to identify those as well. And at this point, it is one of the things we do not have a solid answer on our local markets for glass.
Mr. Lowe, you brought up having boots on the ground, and you're applying for a grant. What kind of timeline can we see on that?
We are very proud to be working with the communities of Summit County to help be a sponsor for it's an Ohio EPA grant that's put out by the Recycling Partnership. And this grant is specifically focused on the northeastern part of Ohio and the southeastern part of Ohio, where the MRF sheds are, if you will. And we're trying to, it came out fairly recently in November. So we're planning on discussing the opportunity with our communities and see what best fits them and evaluate if it's a possibility to provide an education, a cart tagging system, and a means to educate the residents and reduce contamination. So it's a fairly recently released grant and something we still have to work on.
Okay, so in terms of that actually happening, how far off are we?
I believe the application is due in February.
Okay. The application is in February.
Yes.
And then it's unlikely to get the money for another 6 months, or?
We received the grant fairly recently. I don't have the time frame exactly, but I do know from conversations we've been involved with, it's going to be a 24-month grant. So there'll be some time to make sure whatever is decided for the grant, it has time to be implemented.
Okay. What can the average citizen do who's unhappy about this situation? What can the average citizen do to help help us get back to a little higher level recycling?
Unfortunately, it's what the market will bear. If they stick to these items, that will help tremendously.
Okay, so by complying with the guidelines and instructions that okay, and if someone really, really has a passion for this, what other things could they be doing, could the average citizen do, besides following the rules, which is a step forward? What's another thing that the average citizen could do?
I actually would say share the news. So educating is a large task for any municipality, and sharing with their neighbor the reasons why these are the materials that need to be recycled. There is a significant opportunity to increase marketable materials for curbside recycling. So talking about this topic, explaining why these are the items that are recyclable, focusing on what we can recycle, it'd be a great opportunity for the citizen to share that with their neighbors and share this information.
Okay, so since the average person is not going to change the market situation, they could, by talking to other citizens in their community through Facebook,
Yes.
personal conversations, block watches, block meetings, they could try to get everybody to be a little more focused on producing quality materials that can be recycled.
It could come down to an option at the store. If you could buy the same product in can versus bottle, buy the can.
Okay, so that's another thing. So communicating about the situation to people. Another is shopping a little more consciously, thinking about what happens to that product at the end of it, not just while you're using it.
Waste reduction, single-use plastics, evaluating the consumer level is a great direction to focus on for these times.
Okay, those sound like good things. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Mayor, did you? One more, okay, one more question. Just what is the city's commitment on this issue of recycling? I mean, I guess we can look at your practice, and it's been very good, but would you, Chris, or I see Mr. Hardy there, and it's not really fair to ask him, but would you like to make a statement about the city's commitment on recycling? How important is this to us?
Well, it's very important to the city. I mean, we want to reduce waste going to the landfill, and anything we can recycle, any of these materials that you could get into our recycle and reduce waste, we're very committed to that.
Okay. Anybody else want? Okay, it's all right. Ditto? Okay. Okay, Mrs. Keith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've just written down a few notes. I know that most of us here on council have had someone from recycling come out and speak, and I think that we have to keep that up, because as educators, we know that the message sometimes has to be said a number of times before we get it. And we want to keep people recycling. I think that's some of your questions that we have. We don't want to lose that drive of people recycling. So I think it's up to us to make sure that we have them out maybe more than once a year to come to our ward meetings or whatever to speak up. But the big issue, and Councilman Swirsky mentioned, how can we get people to recycle more or get more of a use out of it, is we're not buying recycle. That is a big, not too many people buy recycle, and the more that we put into buying it, the more there's going to be a need for it. And also, when we had thought about possibly reducing our recycling payment that we gave to people who did it, I did a lot of research on this, and much of our material is being warehoused now because there is no need for it. So not only are we collecting it, but now we're paying to warehouse it, which is a shame, because that's just wasted money in my opinion. And also, maybe we need to educate, since there are so many people dumping things, that we do have those large item pickups that we get every year, and most of the time I think people probably use it in the spring, and then when winter comes, it's just no big deal. It's easier to dump it someplace else. So that's another thing we can educate on. And I would really appreciate if we have a few of these, if I could have them. I'm having a ward meeting again this week, and I just like to keep them on the table and keep them as reference. And I know that many of my colleagues do the same thing. But I want to thank you, and I will be calling you to have you come back out again, because sometimes I think they need to hear it from a different speaker also. It's a different tone, a different direction, and I appreciate the city doing what we can, because I think my mother lived through the Depression, and I have always said they were the first recyclers, are people who lived through that, because they knew what it meant to have something in their hand, and they took good care of it. And it was a paper plate. We washed it off and used it again, you know. So, so anyhow, I want to thank you for coming out and educating us even further as to the reasons why we're seeing so many things on here that we cannot use now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council people?
You know, I understand the problem you explained about the bags, plastic bags, but they're all over the place. I mean, lakes and oceans are filling up with plastic. It's become a real big problem. I mean, we're just filling the landfill up with them now. If they don't go into recycling, they're just going into regular trash. And it's
Well, there are places that, like if you go back to your local stores, some of the local stores will take the bags and recycle them, but our MRF does not.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing is, whatever we do, it has to be convenient for the consumer. I mean, there's people that'll go way out of their way to do the right thing, but they're few and far between. And I wish there was more, but that's not the reality of the situation, you know. Most people just want to get rid of this stuff, and it's really a problem. They can't take plastic bags because they're just all over. And
I think Mr. Kilby has a right. Mr. Luddle, which stores do take their plastic bags back?
Acme has a place right where you walk in, they take them back. Yeah. But it could be Giant Eagle takes them back, but it could be as simple as going and getting 5 good reusable bags and take them to the grocery store every time you go.
That's what
then you get no plastic.
Do.
So that'd be another thing that the average citizen can do, is have their own bags and not add to the volume of plastic bags. And some businesses have stopped handing out plastic bags. Yeah. Right. So, but also in like Aldi, we bring our own bags to shop at Aldi. And it'd be great if other grocery stores would follow suit. Yeah. Anyways, I know
I just want to say one last thing.
Go ahead.
I thought a lot about this problem with trash and recycling, and really something eventually is going to have to be done on the federal level. The mandate, you know, they always say we've got to get rid of all these regulations, but packaging is a problem. I mean, it's like they should tell these companies not to use so much stuff, you know, to package something, that they don't have to, but he's probably not gonna see that with the climate we got down there in Washington, but anyways,
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
Hey, thank you guys for coming here today.
You're welcome.
And for the good questions from the council people. With that, we'll call the meeting new and end. Yeah. I got a lot of people asking me about it.
Okay, we'll go right into the planning committee.
I'd like to call the Planning Committee meeting to order, please. All members are present. May I have a motion to accept the minutes from the previous meeting?
Motion to accept the minutes, previous meeting.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. The minutes are accepted. I'm looking at the old agenda. Now, I know we need to follow up on 7. Is there anything we need to do 1 through 6, Mr. Clerk?
Or, okay, hold on.
Mr. Clerk? 1 through 6. Is there anything we need to do with any of those items?
Got it? Okay, substitute offered as an amendment, offered by Amovian, ordinance, amending and/or supplementing Title 15 Land Usage, Chapter 153 of the Zoning Code, Section 153-140, definitions by defining supportive housing in Section 153.305F, private parking for residents, occupants, by revising the amount of required off-street residential parking requirement and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Madam Chair, this basically amends this ordinance at the urging of Councilwoman Sims. Essentially, we redefine special needs as specific needs and then list those specific types of supportive housing structures. So this is an amendment to that ordinance.
And what you have under 153.140 is the definition of supportive
Yes,
apartment
this
housing?
amends that definition of supportive housing.
Now, is this something, did we get this from any particular document or just what we consider it down here?
Yeah, this would be a change to the zoning code. So it's a zoning code text change, and it redefines that supportive housing, requiring 1 parking space for every 4 dwelling units for supportive housing.
Yeah, I do understand that part, but I'm just thinking of the part about the definition of supportive housing, apartment house. Where do we get this definition from?
Yeah, that was some research that we did, looking around other codes, and we wanted to basically define what supportive housing would be. So that's what we...
And the only reason I'm asking is that there is a definition that is used. I'm just wondering if we want to be congruent with what the continuum of care and all those folks. There is a specific definition for supportive housing. Did you look this up, Mrs. Tomek?
There is a specific definition for supportive housing, but I don't know that this parking requirement is limited to continuum of care projects only.
And see, that is what I wanted to know, because it looks like you've lifted this and talked specifically about supportive housing. And the last ordinance, I thought, covered other housing as well.
It could also include not necessarily projects funded through the continuum of care,
Right.
but also low-income housing tax credit projects that bypass the local continuum of care but still meet those definitions.
Right, and the actual definition is not supportive housing, it's supportive apartment house.
Okay.
So it's a different
Okay.
different category.
Okay. And I see what we're trying to do. We're trying to limit the number of parking spaces that we're asking developers to create that may be unnecessary.
Right.
Particularly in cases where they would be housing people that don't own a lot of cars,
Sure.
and that's what prompted that definition.
But I think Mr. Fusco, and I think what he requested, I think it was you, it was essentially to provide some parking spaces for visitors and family members and so forth. What questions do we have as committee? Mr. Fusco?
Thank you. I would be happy with the consent agenda on this item. I think we've had an opportunity to look at it, clean it up, and I'd recommend consent agenda. And matter of fact, that's short of any questions or comments, that's my recommendation. That's a motion.
Okay. Are there other questions, comments?
There was some specific language that there was request to clean up a little. Did you make some changes on that?
Yes, this was
Just like
under,
a sentence or
the
two.
definition of supportive apartment house. Instead of to house people with special needs, we changed that to say to house people with specific needs, and we list those needs.
They listed the groups that could encompass those individuals with special needs.
Okay.
Mrs. Sims, I know that you...
Right.
Oh, you don't have
Okay.
a voice. She doesn't have a voice, it sounds like. Are there other council members with questions or comments? Hearing none, the motion's been made to put this, did you say consent agenda or time, Mr. Fusco?
Consent.
Consent. Is there a second for consent? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The motion passes. Okay. So that takes care of that on the old agenda, as well as the new agenda. Is there anything else, Mr. Clerk, that we need to address? On the
Madam
old-
Chair, what'd you do with 8 through 11? Time?
Yeah, I think so, because I don't think we've addressed those yet. So we'll take time. Okay?
Okay.
So we'll go to the new agenda. Item 1, ordinance authorizing the execution of a development agreement with Mayflower Manor Apartments, Ohio LP, and Mayflower Manor Apartments LLC, providing for the acquisition, sale, and redevelopment of property in the downtown redevelopment plan area. Finding such property is not needed for any public use and related findings, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Hardy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm going to provide a very brief overview of the project in general, and then throw it over to Sean to talk about the development agreement itself, and then all three of us, Helen, Ms. Tomic, and myself, and Mr. Volman are here to answer your questions. This project is the long-awaited restoration and renovation of the Mayflower downtown. About a year ago now, Capital Realty Group, which owns about approximately 100,000 units of affordable housing across the country, purchased the Mayflower from the previous owner. This was a significant development because if anybody who has followed the Mayflower's history knows that one of the big sticking points to improving that property and the experience of those living there was the need for new ownership or more progressive ownership. So that occurred about a year ago, and we were in discussions there and after with Capital Realty Group about what we would like to see and what we'd be willing to support as it relates to the renovation and restoration of the Mayflower Manor. Happy to report that the project will not displace anyone who currently resides in the building. The new owners do intend to transition the building naturally over time to a senior affordable housing facility. So as leases, as folks move out on their own, or as there are evictions, which do happen from time to time, and there are available units, they will be marketing specifically to the senior affordable housing population and transitioning that. But no one who lives there now will be displaced by this renovation and this restoration. They will only occur as people move on or as they leave through the eviction process. Additionally, the new owners have committed to provide more services within the building for those who live there, which has been a concern of this body as well as previous and current administrations, to get more services into the building so that folks have what they need to be successful in their living arrangement. They've also committed to first floor Main Street level retail, of which there are some now, but there are some areas that are still vacant, that front Main Street. They're committed to getting those rebuilt, leased out, which will help the property in general. Many of you may know that this is another significant site for AA. They've committed to preserving that history. I would love to say that they're going to bring back all the marquees. I'm not really sure if that's in their plan, but they definitely are going to preserve the history and restore the building, which will take several years, obviously, because they're going to be restoring it while people are living there. This is their second project in Ohio, so this isn't their first, it's their second project in Ohio. And we're very excited about the prospect of them getting underway in about a year's time. They're still, once the development agreement's signed, they would like to obviously need some time to do the design work and apply for state and federal historic tax credits. This is another project that's going to be seeking those. But we're hopeful that within a year's time post the signing of the development agreement that we would see construction begin. But I'll pitch it to Sean to talk about the development agreement itself.
Yes, and this is a development agreement, form of which you're somewhat familiar with, we've done in the past, where we are going to take title to the property and then transfer it back out almost immediately. That would help create tax increment financing to assist with the project. Under the development agreement, they've committed to at least $10 million of improvements to the building. The city itself does not purchase, we are not spending any money to acquire the building, nor are we selling, or we are getting it transferred to us, and we're transferring it back out in the same condition in which we received it. And the project will be eligible for the residential tax abatement, but there will also be TIF for the retail portions. And then in the years 16 through 30, which is after the residential tax abatement runs up. So that's basically, that's the nuts and bolts of it.
Just one other thing before we pass it back to questions. I just want to thank publicly, so many city staff have been working on the Mayflower to get it into productive improvement and a cycle that's better for those that live there and for those that will live there for a long time. Helen, Sam, many of them are here, and I just want to give them recognition because they worked very hard on this building for a lot of years. And this is it appears to be a very reputable and committed ownership group who want to see good things for downtown Akron, but also for the residents who live there and will live there. And so with that, happy to take any questions you have.
Okay. I just have a couple just to kick it off. Did they seek us out or did we seek them?
They sought us out. So the first initial transaction was a private transaction between Capital Realty Group and the previous owner in terms of the purchase of the building. And when they were considering purchasing the building, and we're pretty close to purchasing it, was when they reached out to us to discuss how the city could assist the project.
So where is their other project located?
The one in Ohio, I believe, is the former Eastland Mall in Columbus.
In Columbus.
So that was a vacant and abandoned mall that they transformed that site into affordable housing.
Okay. Now, when you say you're going to transition it over time to seniors, are they going to be HUD? Are they going to be subsidized housing?
The building was a HAP building, a Housing Affordable Program building through HUD. They are going to maintain that status for the next 20 years. So it is going to remain subsidized through the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
So we do understand that even though it's seniors, individuals that are disabled would qualify.
It's a HUD's definition, but I believe there's a criteria, and their definition of seniors is 55 and older.
Yes.
But individuals that are disabled would still be eligible.
Yes, but
even
yes.
those that are younger. Yeah, I just want to make sure of that.
Yeah, it'll be a HUD's definition of senior housing.
Okay. The current tenants, and I'm not really sure how far along this developer has gotten. Will they be involved in some discussion about the design and what's going to happen in the building? Do they try to include the voices of those individuals?
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think that that's something we could absolutely talk to the ownership group about. I'm not sure that they have formally put anything like that together yet.
Okay.
But once the development agreement's effectuated, they would want to get into the design phase, and we could absolutely talk to them about including the current tenants in, especially the spaces, not only their current living spaces, but what they might want as it relates to amenities.
Right. Exactly. That was going to be my point, too, that some of the services that they may want to consider. Is there any plan to increase the rent? It would be 30% of their income, because that is part of HUD too, right?
Rent would be dictated by HUD requirements, so it would be based on income and up to 30% if there is income.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Are there other questions of the committee members? Mr. Fusca.
Thank you, Ms. Mobian. I just applaud the efforts of the developer, and I think you were hitting on some things that are key here, and that is what services are going to be available to the folks there. In 2015, whenever I was on the second floor, we had spent a lot of time talking to then ownership and developing strategies to assist the folks in that space. We've got to be careful how we go about that. But the transition is a long-term transition from what I understand correctly.
That's correct.
And it's going to be done through attrition.
Correct.
And I assume the COC has been able to weigh in and be part of this discussion as well?
We will be part of those conversations.
Yeah.
We have members of COC that are involved with a lot of the clients that stay at the Mayflower.
The services that are provided are going to be critical, and especially whenever, I don't know what that sweet spot's going to look like down the road, whenever it's going to transition into the senior citizen piece, which just makes all the sense in the world in terms of the aging of America, Akron. But the next question is that, and I think there needs to be some caution in terms of how they go about the redevelopment so that folks aren't displaced. And because whenever they go into these units and they repair these units and upgrade the units, which really need it in a in a big way. As we know, a couple years ago, some of us went through the building itself and saw what kind of condition it's in. It's really bad. And so I don't know what the strategy is on that, but they got to be sensitive to the owner, or to the tenants there.
So we did talk about that with the developer, and they have done thousands and thousands of units. They, I don't want to use the word military time, but it's almost like that. They'll go in, they'll get the lay of the, especially the kitchen. So what will happen is they'll show up at 8 a.m. The tenant will be asked to leave for the day, and the entire kitchen, countertops, cabinets, painting floors will be replaced within that day. So when they come back at 5 o'clock, they'll come back to a brand new kitchen. They're not doing all 233 units at one time, so it's staggered, but they are very, very considerate of the tenants and what their needs are. So we did have that conversation, and they've done this before, and so they have it all planned out.
That's great. It's very encouraging to hear. And plus to have the also discussion with our fire department as well, because I know our EMS folks, they are there all the time. And so I believe in terms of, the functionality of the building itself, honestly, that could make a difference in terms of the way it's redesigned and rebuilt, if you will. So this is very encouraging, and I'm glad to hear that these steps are being taken and we have a responsible owner there. But I have some more questions I'll ask offline. Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Swirsky?
Yeah, just, well, first, I'm glad to hear that the population will change through attrition over a period of time, and really relying on the choice of the individuals to stay there or leave. And secondly, and also that you are, you see the people who are living there as a resource in the design and in the makeup of what eventually is going to be replaced there. And I think it's wise to tap into them. And I know there was a tenants council. I think it's a little bit not so active now, but there's a lot of pretty articulate, opinionated people who'd be glad to share those with you. And I also am pleased to hear that you are recognizing the historic importance of this building, and that the developer does, and not simply to get some tax credits, but it has played a huge role in Akron's development and history, and our connection with really national trends in meeting alcoholism, addiction. So you guys you're putting it together pretty well here.
Yeah, we, two quick items. One thing that the developers recognized before we even were able to is, I believe, correct me, that the actual phone booth that Dr. Bob used is still in the front lobby area, and they are committed to preserving that and actually creating a way for people to come and view it and look at the phone book to where to where that phone call was made. And so the second thing is that I know we are aware that there's been many talk over the years of what should the fate of the Mayflower be. The mayor feels very strongly that downtown's renaissance should be for everybody. There should be a mix of market rate and affordable and low income. And so preserving the Mayflower, not only as a structure, but as an affordable housing development right on Main Street, we felt particularly important, and Downtown Akron Partnership agreed as well. And so I was very happy, all of us were very happy that there really was not pushback from the community that's very vested in downtown development to say, you know what, no, downtown needs to be for everybody, and the Mayflower can be restored as an affordable housing unit. So we're very excited that that will be the case.
That's a great statement. Appreciate that.
Are there other questions, concerns? Mr. Kilby?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sean, would you explain the development agreement a little more in depth? I mean, I heard the part about we're going to purchase it for $10 million from, well, I got it wrong then.
If I give that impression, I apologize. They're going to do about $10 million worth of improvements to we are having it transferred to us. We are not paying and then we're not selling it, we're transferring it back out to the developer. Well, the current owner is Mayflower Manor Apartments LLC, but that is, it's a Capital Realty? Capital Realty Group's an entity that they created. Mm-hmm. And we're giving it back to a related entity.
So we have money that they use to redevelop it, that's $10 million.
Well, the $10 million in theory would raise the value of the property. They call it the tax increment. And we have an agreement with the schools to share a portion of that, and then we would get we have an agreement with the developer that we're sharing the TIF. But to the city, we're not really outlaying anything as far as the development goes, so it's all a benefit to us. And but as I said, for the first 15 years, they'll be under the residential tax abatement. But again, that would be with respect to the increase.
Right.
You know, what the current value is, it will be treated the same as it is now.
So when they transition to senior citizens, is it going to be individual apartments, one at a time, or are they going to say, well, we're going to try to get everybody off of this floor, put them over here? You've talked about that kind of stuff? I mean,
I believe it's just one at a time. It's as there's an available unit, they're going to be marketing to 55 and over, and/or, well, the HUD rules around senior housing.
all right, Mr. Hardy, you mentioned they made a commitment to have some more facilities down there. Like, I know you mentioned the retail stores, but what other kind of facilities do they have? Do they want to have for the residents down there?
Yes, sir. So I think those would be part and parcel to the design phase, but they have committed to provide more amenities for the tenants themselves. So not for the public, but for the tenants. So that could be a mix of the ability for agency space for folks that are affiliated with a COC agency, but it also could be, if you're not, what amenities would the tenants like in that facility?
Do they have any exercise room down there or anything now, or it seems like that would be something that some people might want?
I'm not sure about the exercise room, but I just wanted to add on to what Mr. Harvey indicated. They did mention they will have events there, and the community as a whole will be invited.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
It could be on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, so some of those events will not just be limited to the residents that are staying there, but it could be other downtown residents or the community as a whole. And they've given us some examples where the community as a whole loves some of the events that they put on.
Right.
It's a great opportunity where folks can meet and get to know each other.
Yeah, I know there used to be a big ballroom down there. I never seen it. I just heard about it, but it's probably still there. Is it being used for anything, that ballroom down there, or no?
I think that's something they would look at in the redesign, and they did mention to me also, just to follow up on what Helen and James said, that the redesign probably would include an exercise facility, because that is lacking. And I think another type of service they mentioned would be like a concierge service that would help older residents with groceries or things like that. So not just bricks and mortar, but people who can help them.
Right, that's not a bad idea. What about the parking down there? I mean, I know there's a parking lot behind the place, because I knew somebody used to live down there. Go down and visit him. He didn't have a car, but is it adequate parking for the residents?
So interestingly, the committee just took up a zoning change that I think fits very well with this particular type of development.
Right.
There is parking down there, and obviously there's, Helen can speak more to the tenant parking, but a lot of the tenants really do not have vehicles, and so.
A few do.
Yeah, a few do. So I think we have enough parking down there in that vicinity that we can work with the developer, but you know, if council's supportive of the change that was just put on consent, it would give more flexibility to the developer to not have to build excess parking that would essentially sit vacant.
Right. So what is the building appraised for? Do you have any idea, like, what that building's worth on the market?
Yeah, I mean, we did an appraisal, and I will defer to my colleagues on that. I know that I'm not privy to exactly what the private sale was in terms of what they came to terms with. You think about 2.5?
Yeah, I think the county at least had it valued around $2.5 million.
2.5 million?
Market rate might be a little higher than that, but I'm not privy to what the private transaction was.
Okay, well, you know, sounds like you guys thought about everything, you know, and I support this. I think it's good development for our downtown.
Are there Councilwoman Sims?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam President. So I'm going to go really, really low.
You want to write it down and somebody?
I think,
Could you tell her and she'll ask it?
No, write it.
so will there be any way for us to monitor the rate of eviction as it currently stands?
Absolutely.
Thank you. The second
Is
thing,
it rate of eviction?
Monitor the rate of evictions,
Yeah,
so we want to
so
make sure that
let's-
they're not evicting people. Yep.
yeah, the second part is, this is new to me, where the go between the current owner and the future owner. How does that show up for us in property taxes? How does that show up on the roll? And are we doing this because this is how the TIF works? Or I just need to, it sounds a little wonky for a better term. But is this just a growing trend of the way people, because in my years I've been here, I've never seen us do this.
Yeah, there are times, I mean, and this was not one I was all that involved with, but the Goodyear development was similar, where the city took, or stepped into the title. One I was involved with was the depot housing had been owned by the Beacon Journal, and then the city took it and then transferred to the developer. It would not affect our obligations for income tax, or I'm sorry, real estate property taxes, because it's going to go change ownership the same day. So the city won't even have had a full day's ownership of the.
So is there a window of time where that doesn't happen? Is it 24 hours or 6 months? Or
It will happen immediately. I don't think that the developer, the current owner, wants us to hold on to it for free. Yeah.
just from our own
Yes.
self-interest?
Yeah, absolutely. It will be, the transfer will be almost immediate. It will be the same day.
Is there a window of time where it doesn't appear on our tax roll? So is there a set period of time?
No, I mean, it will not show up as city-owned on the records. I mean, it won't show it will be, a deed will be recorded to us, and then they'll file another deed right after.
So this happens in 24 hours?
Well, we're within probably 24 minutes.
24, okay, thank you.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Bowman. In order for this project to be considered for some of these programs, TIF and other things, I'm not really sure what other things the city is doing, it has to pass through the city's hands in order for them to be eligible?
Yes, for the type of TIF that we're doing, yes.
And you want to talk a little bit more about the kind of TIF you're doing?
There is 5709.41 is the statute under which
57 what?
5709.41 of the revised code is the statute under which we do the vast majority of our TIF.
Okay.
And it is, the reason why the city ownership is involved is it calculates the increment. The base level is as of the date that it was acquired by the city.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the increase from that point on is what is TIF'd. So in order to have that baseline, we would have to have been part of the ownership of the.
Okay. I'm understanding now. And they will also be eligible for the 15-year tax abatement?
Correct. And that will be the vast majority of the value will be in the actual residential, as opposed to whatever would be considered
And
commercial.
Madam Chair, it might be worth noting that the Carlton building, which is on consent right now, is a similar
Correct.
pop-in, pop-out, where in order for that to be eligible for a .41, we need to establish that baseline legally, so we get in the chain of title, and then we transfer
That's
back.
the video next to the peanut shop that we
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Mr. That's
exactly what I was saying.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments by council members? Councilwoman
city center on the historical tax credits. Was that a pursuit that was happening right away? This one is about a year at its earliest.
So the question, yes, was about the state and federal historic tax credits. There could be an overlap. It's not likely. These two projects are on different timelines, but should there be an overlap, we do have the ability as a city to support more than one project and still give them the points. So our desire would be that they would be on different application periods, so we'll work with the developers on that, but should there be the off chance that they would be, we can still support both.
Thank you.
Thank you. I like the others stated, I really appreciate the fact that the Mayflower is getting a long overdue overhaul and that the residents are not being displaced. That is the most critical piece. And I too appreciate the statement that the city of Akron is for all of our citizens. So that is great to hear. The taxes that are currently being paid, could someone give us that information before tonight?
Certainly.
On the property?
What were their, yep, we can get you that.
Because that won't change, it sounds like, for 15 years.
No, ma'am.
You know, it sounds wonderful that we're bringing in all these new developments and renovations. We're going to experience some tight times for a while we go through this transition. In particular, Mayflower is not going to generate probably very much in terms of new tenants, at least initially. And I guess there is a desire for some of these other buildings that we've been talking about to bring in some new population. So we need to keep some kind of tally of all of these new structures that we are inviting to come into the city. It'd be nice to look at what we're talking about and
We can do
and
that.
also kind of review what we're talking about in terms of taxes as well. With that said, is there, what do we need to do?
Consent would be fine. It's at
Consent.
the pleasure of the committee.
Okay. Is there a motion for consent?
Motion for consent?
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Oppose? The ordinance passes. Okay. The next item we have is item number 2, ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute and deliver a cooperative agreement related to the establishment of the Firestone Business Park, authorizing the sale of certain real property of the city, such property being no longer needed for public use, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We're very pleased to bring to you what we believe is the final and overarching piece before we get started on a much-needed and very exciting development in Firestone Park, and that is the Firestone Business Park. So I won't steal their thunder. Mr. DeShazier and Mr. Volman have been working very diligently on this. I'm here to answer questions, but I'll pitch it over to Sean to talk about the finer points of the agreement. But essentially, what this does by having a cooperative agreement, what you're authorizing is the final effectuation, if you will, of everything that we've brought forth to date, so that we can get started with construction. But I'll pitch it to Mr. Volman for an overview of the agreement itself.
Yeah, thank you. The cooperative agreement, you know, this was with 5 parties. Currently, the APV and certain entities, APV-related entities, own land out by Firestone Business Park, and the city owns some land as well. This is an overarching agreement to allow for the development of that property. It allows the city's part of it. It allows us to sell a parcel of land to the county for development. It also will consolidate a number of other lots owned by other entities who will then will transfer that to the city, and then the city will transfer that back out to, is it Pleasant Valley Corporation, for development, and then the city is holding on to a final piece to hold on to for future development as well. There are a number of, I think this has all gone to council, a number of vacations and consolidations and the like that has come to this council before that is in the process of happening. But, you know, essentially for us, we have a land transaction where we're selling off city land for development. So it's pretty similar to other deals we do in business parks.
Okay. Mr. DeShazer, I'm assuming you.
Well, this transaction actually gives us an opportunity to invite new industry and also new opportunities for growth for existing companies in the area who sometimes look outside because they don't know that there's this opportunity here close to the embedded areas where there's already infrastructure. It's got a historical viewpoint of production and the like. So I don't know what else is that I can add to it other than this is probably the first inner city park for industry since the 1960s Opportunity Park project, which brought about Opportunity Park's development along Barger Street.
And I would only add, before we take questions, that obviously the county is purchasing their parcel from us for a consolidated environmental services division and fleet services division. And then Pleasant Valley, and Sam, Mr. DeShazer can speak to this better than I can, but there is a dire need in this community for speculative, meaning already built but not filled industrial space. And it's incredible. We don't have, believe it or not, a lot of brand new speculative empty industrial space. We have a lot of old industrial space that needs a lot of work. But we get how many calls a year, would you think? Yeah, probably 40 calls a year from people looking for high, you know, a certain ceiling height, a certain abilities from an electrical, you name it, utilities perspective, and we don't have a lot of brand new, ready-to-go sites. So having Pleasant Valley a part of this to construct is going to be good for Firestone Park, good for the neighborhood, good for Akron, to be able to have that. We obviously need more, but you got to start somewhere.
So how much land are you talking about?
Let's see if I have the exact square footages. The lot that we currently own and are transferring out to Pleasant Valley is about a little over an acre, maybe 1.2 acres. The county is that more like a 10-acre?
Yeah, it's a larger site.
The county site is more of a 10-acre site. And then again, the rest of it, and I don't have...
it's about five acres and change is what we'll be left over with that we still will own for redevelopment.
Now, this land, are we talking about along the Wilbeth Road area? Where are we talking about?
We'll actually be building an extension of Cole Avenue, which will come off of South Main Street and make a left-hand turn, and then cul-de-sac for now, because we hope that there will be future phases of the Firestone Business Park. So you're really just you'll be turning right into the entrance to the business park off of South Main onto Cole. Okay. You come down, and there will be parcels on either side, so Pleasant Valley, if memory serves, and Mr. DeSager can correct me, the Pleasant Valley site and APV sites will be on your left-hand side as you go down Cole Avenue. The county will be right at the curve there. And then our parcel will be after you've made the left-hand turn on your right-hand side. We will have the parcel left.
Now, Pleasant Valley is building for themselves or for the speculative property?
This will be speculative buildings. So what comes to us, and I want to buttress what James has been saying in terms of the pent-up demand for having a chance to be able to lease ready-to-go space inside of the city. The most common request is for a 2,500 square foot piece, a 5,000 square foot piece, and a 10,000 square foot piece. Or to have a company that come that has 25,000 square foot, but they have future plans to expand to 10. So essentially what this does is on speculative building, it gives an opportunity for new up-and-coming innovative businesses to go in first, lease the space, and then have prospects for growth here within the city. And so Pleasant Valley will come on speculation. They will build, they will own, they will lease. Our companies will come, they will lease, and they will grow. And through all of the network of the TRICA of economic development, we'll provide the services for growth. And we'll also look for opportunities for them to expand and prosper right here inside of the city of Akron.
I don't know, Mr. Kamer, I'm sure you are aware of what's going on. I don't know if you have any questions or you can shed more light on for us. Or any more illumination? Okay, are there other questions from committee members? Questions from non-committee members?
So I thought did I hear you say that again, land will come into you, that you will then transfer to someone else, or this is all our land?
In this situation, the city will be taking title to land that is owned by EPV, and then we're combining that land with land that we currently own and sending that big parcel out to Pleasant Valley.
So that's just a little different from what we're doing.
Yes, a little different. Correct. Yeah. But about the same time frame.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Neal.
Mr. Hardy, the land from APD, is that part of a, is that part of a land swap that we've done? Are we swapping something out with them? Or is it just a straight out purchase from APD?
We are purchasing it from APV for the 25,000 an acre, and then we're selling it out for the 25,000 an acre to APV, Pleasant Valley.
APV, Akron Paint and Varnish, is, yeah, I know where you're going with it, yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Private.
I heard never mind.
You heard APS. I hear what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's private.
Akron Paint and Varnish.
It's a
yes.
private business, Akron Paint and Varnish. Sorry.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just real quick.
Mr. Fusco?
Thanks. The, excuse me, we've seen a number of pieces come through on this, and this has been, this is like the fruition of it, I would say.
That's correct.
And that, you know, identifying this market gap that we have is great, and trying to fill that gap in the market in terms of demand is this parcel, this development will be perfect for that. And so, like I said, this is nothing new for us to see this, but this part of it is new. So let's move forward on this. This is a good proposal.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's an incredible public-private partnership. You have APV, Akron Paint and Varnish. You have Pleasant Valley, so two private sector entities that are coming to the table. You have the county, who had a need, which was outdated environmental services divisions that were scattered across the county. And then you had the city, who owned the land. And I'm sure Councilman Cameron will remind us that we still have a long way to go on South Main with the redevelopment of the old Firestone site. But this is going to be an incredible first step with everyone at the table.
Mrs. Sims?
So I understand the little part. I didn't realize we were purchasing property. I thought there was some kind of transfer, but I understand better. But have we given thought to, within the Summit County Department of Jobs and Family Services, lots of space that didn't get developed, about job training centers there to meet some of the speculative needs that we're talking about?
Absolutely.
Building for, since we
Yes.
have Stark Stake and all those other folks.
Yes, so the question was, if I heard correctly, can we leverage Job and Family Services being right there in the Triangle Building to help make sure that those jobs that are developed by the business park are readily available and accessible? Yes. The county has made that commitment that they will do whatever is needed. They're a partner in this park. It wouldn't be possible without the county, so they have fully committed that whatever they need to do to help as we get fishes on the hook, if you will, for the speculative building or even our land that will be left over, that we have that ability to bring those services to bear.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none. What is the pleasure?
If the committee is comfortable, we'd love suspension of the rules. Again, this is really the fruition. You've approved a lot of the individual pieces, parts of this already, and we would like to get underway, obviously before winter really strikes with the road work.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Did you get that, Mr. Clerk? The vote? Okay.
Got it.
Okay. The third ordinance, ordinance amending, supplementing Title 15 Land Usage, Chapter 153 Zoning Code, Section 153.1.
We've already dealt with that one.
Oh, we've already done that. Thank you. So are we done?
We are adjourned.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you for catching that.
Well, they had one. They gave it to certain people out here. Ask Chris. Or I'll try to ask Chris. Do you have a handout, sir, from that first piece of yours? Just that thing that...
If you're on the Public Service Committee, I would like to be able to start here since we're, oh my
I know,
gosh,
I've
we're
had
really
10,
behind.
I just want to know, just big announcement, I know that the clock isn't working, okay? Thank you.
You must have been told that.
Someone stole the second hand. No, it's bubbles from their wedding. I called building maintenance last week. They're in there. Well, look, if you go in the office, Bruce, you'll see them.
Oh, okay, here we are. And I'm going to call the Public Service Committee to order, and everyone is in attendance. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes from our past meeting? I have a motion, and I have a second. Okay, so I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, the minutes pass. We have nothing on the old agenda, so we will go to the new agenda. Under Public Service, number 4, this is a resolution approving and confirming the reappointment of Robert DeJournay and Nicholas Fernandez to the Metropolitan Regional Transit Authority, or Metro Board of Trustees, and declaring an emergency. Okay, and Mr. James Hardy, Chief of Staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This is a resolution, as it says, reappointing Mr. DeJournay and Mr. Fernandez to the Metro Board of Trustees. Mr. DeJournay currently serves as chair of that board and has been doing an incredible job under some difficult circumstances, as we know, moving the board forward. Mr. Fernandez has also done an equally incredible job. He is an employee of First Energy Corp., so he brings a private sector mindset. Both obviously reside within the city of Akron. We feel they've served very well in their first initial term of 3 years, and we're asking for another council's consent and approval for another 3-year term for each of these gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hardy. Are there any questions from the committee? Any? Okay, let me check and see if there's any questions from other council members, and then I will take that. Any other questions from council members in the chambers? Seeing none, suspension of rules?
That'd be wonderful, thank you.
Okay. I have a motion for suspension of rules. Is there a second? And I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will pass with suspension of the rules. Number 5, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to enter into a contract without publicly advertising for bids with the Southeast Harley-Davidson Sales Company for golf cart usage at Good Park Golf Course, authorizing payment therefore and declaring an emergency. Mr. Luttle?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. What we're asking is to extend our current agreement. Our current agreement ran out, and we're asking to extend it for 1 more year. The golf carts that we have in this lease it's pretty much a bumper-to-bumper coverage. They cover everything, and we signed this agreement for 6 years. They replaced all the batteries in our golf carts. These current ones 2 years ago, they're a 5-year battery. So we talked to them about extending it. They dropped the price down to $700 per year, which is the $41,300. When we initially signed the contract, the contract was for $900 per cart, which was $53,000 a year. So we feel like they're in very good shape. We're trying to take very good care of them. So we're going to try to get another year on with this lease without going to a new lease, which we've interviewed or talked to other public golf courses that don't own their carts, and they're as much as $1,000 a cart per year.
It's Cyber Monday. Let's jump on this deal. Okay, are there any questions from members of the committee? Any questions from members, council members in the chambers? Councilwoman Amobian?
You may have answered this, I just didn't hear it. Is there a reason why we don't own our own golf carts?
The expense of maintaining of them. We did a business case on leasing them with all the maintenance. There's 6 batteries in each cart, and they cost $100 per battery. Now, if we do get the 5 years out of them, you have to replace these, and then you have to have people work on them. So we did a business case, and what we rent them for every time they go out, it's more beneficial to lease them with the full warranty and the full maintenance agreement.
Really?
Yes.
And you have that comparative
Yes.
analysis?
I don't have it here, but I can get it for you.
Yeah, that'd be nice to see. Thank
Sure.
you.
Anyone else?
Consent's
What
fine.
is your preference?
Consent's fine.
Consent? Do I have a motion for consent? A second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will pass on the consent agenda. Is there anything else to come before public service? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Whenever you're ready,
All
sir.
right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and move forward with the public safety meeting. We are running behind, so all members are present. We do not have nothing on our old agenda, but can we get approval of the minutes of the meeting we had last week, please? All in favor? Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. With that, we're moving forward with 2 new pieces of legislation in front of us. First piece, authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase of certain audio-visual equipment and related services, including interactive projectors, televisions, receivers, speakers, and cables, and other hardware and software for use by the Akron Police Department, declaring emergency. We have with our Deputy Mayor of Public Safety, Charlie Brown. Please introduce everybody to us.
Sure, thank you, and good afternoon. To my left is Captain Melissa Shanae. To her left is Sergeant Eric Wood.
All right, thank you. Who wants to explain a little bit?
Okay, this request is part of our Police Citizen Academy project, and the equipment would upgrade equipment in 3 classrooms, one being our defensive tactics room that will receive upgrades that will enhance the learning and demonstration process, which will lead to greater understanding behind the application of force and the various techniques of when force is used to help the citizens who attend this Citizen Academy understand what officers have to go through and the types of decision-making processes they use.
All right, thank you, Captain. Anything else? We're good there? Any questions or comments? I don't have anything. Anyone? Any council members? All right, with that, what's the pleasure we're looking at?
Suspension of the rules, please.
All right, their pleasure, suspension of the rules. Anybody wants to make a motion?
Motion for suspension of the rules.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, we'll pass that this evening. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, our next piece, authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Interval Brotherhood Home to provide comprehensive residential drug and alcohol treatment to eligible individuals and declare an emergency. We have with us the mayor's chief of staff, James Hardy, and I believe Sean Volman from our law department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. What you have before you is the renewal of the ongoing contract with IBH, Interval Brotherhood Home, to provide residential addiction services for the Akron Municipal Court. We've been working with IBH on this contract. We actually have representation from IBH here if the committee has any questions. Again, this is a year-over-year contract, so this would be, I believe, for through 2019, or essentially.
This one runs from a July through June, so it is, it actually started, we need to, July 1st is the effective date of that. It'll run through June 30th of 2019.
And essentially, sorry, Sean.
Yeah, that's okay.
Essentially what this allows our judges to do, and we did consult with the municipal court judges on this, it allows for more immediate placement of those that come before the municipal court who are in need of residential addiction services and the other services that IBH provides. The county does pay for beds at IBH that we are obviously eligible for. This essentially allows us to, for someone adjudicated through the municipal court to get service faster and get into treatment quicker. And with that, we're happy to take any questions the committee has.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Any questions from committee members? Councilwoman Marilyn Keith, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there an increase here from last year?
No.
Okay, so that's a wonderful
Total
thing.
price, yeah.
Okay, that's a good thing. And I can attest to IBH, but we have other people in the audience that will probably do some of their own. As we know, our jails cannot be rehab centers. So this truly is, if someone is suffering from addiction, this is a lovely alternative to being placed in a jail and having to come to terms with withdrawal, along with just setting yourself on the right path to get healthy again. So I commend the city for their efforts and for the continued support of IBH, and I am certainly in favor of this.
Yeah, I would, since you mentioned, I would like to point out Deborah Foster-Cook, who is the executive director of IBH, has come down. Dean Sloan, who is the CFO, is that the proper? And they are both happy to talk about the program, answer any questions and that you may have.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, sure. Instead of moving forward with questions, I'll just turn it back over, or turn it over to you to speak for a few minutes. So go ahead, please.
Well, on behalf of IBH, I really want to sincerely thank all of you for your consideration of this contract renewal. It's very much appreciated. We feel that we're different from a lot of other treatment centers in the state of Ohio because of our focus on spirituality, which is not a focus on religion, but it is a focus on, reestablishing a relationship with self and reestablishing a relationship with a higher power and reestablishing connection with others. And after that happens, people are in a better position to give back to the community, stay sober, give back to the community, and just say thank you to the people that have supported them through their addiction. We also have something that we call the IBH Reach Project. It gives people an opportunity for structured volunteering. It's open to anyone who finishes our program for a year after they finish the program. It's at no charge to them, and we receive no public money for that. It's just something that we think is very important to help people stay sober. We are also getting very much interested in suicide prevention, so we are doing something we call caring contacts with people when they leave treatment. Just make sure they're doing okay, just check in with them, and we do that at 30 days post-treatment and 90 days post-treatment as well. And during those caring contacts, we're also asking people how they're doing with their housing, how they're doing with employment or going back to school, and we also find out, housing, contact with law enforcement, and like I said, employment or, getting involved with school. And we have put a whole lot more emphasis on relapse prevention in this past year, so we really hope we're sending people out with a solid foundation to continue with whatever kind of aftercare program they're in. And would be really happy to take questions.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Any questions? Okay, I'll go to Veronica Sims. You did have your hand up first, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I thought last year we were working really hard to make sure we can bring all the contracts under compliance that are like this, including Oriana. How do we get 4 months out? Do you know?
So Oriana is definitely in a much better place. IBH was one of the other contracts that we're working through. So there were questions that we needed to work through with IBH as it relates to what county ADM pays, what we pay, what other cities pay or do not pay. So that took a little bit more time than we anticipated, but we do have a very good sense of where that all lies now. And so we had every intention of bringing this forward, but the delay was due to a due diligence that we were trying to go through to make sure that, certainly as been noted here, IBH plays a critical role in the community as we combat addiction. But like everything, this is a hefty contract, and we wanted to make sure that the judges were finding value, that we were clear on what everyone pays in the system, so that we could be crystal clear as to what we're getting for the dollars we're spending. So going forward, we hope to not have this delay.
Okay. So what year is this of this contract? So how many years have we been contracted with IBH?
I don't know how far back it goes. I know I've been doing this contract since 2009, so it's at least that long.
At least 10 years.
Yeah, and this is a 1 year agreement. So yeah.
Final question. The issues with alcohol hasn't really dissipated. People are still drinking and drinking earlier and drinking much. What percentage of, do you know, the beds are we treating alcohol, or are we treating the opioid addiction? My question would be to my colleagues' inquiry about the increase in contract. It seems like we would be supporting a lot more folks who are dealing more with the opiate addiction than alcohol, and it seems like that cost would be a little different.
Sure, and we have worked with IBH in partnership to keep the cost of the contract level. even with the opiate epidemic. I don't have those numbers, but I'm sure we can get them. But if you even just, I asked my colleagues at IBH if they have any general sense of the breakdown in terms of the types of addiction that you're seeing.
Yeah, for state fiscal year 2018, which was July 1st of 2017 to June 30th of this year, we were privileged to serve 19 people under this contract. Now I'm going to give you their primary drug of choice, but most people are using a mixture of substances, so this is a little bit misleading. But 9 people told us that their primary drug of choice was heroin. 2 people told us that their primary drug of choice was alcohol. 2 people told us that their primary drug of choice was cocaine or crack. And then 2 people told us methamphetamines, and then the rest of it was marijuana, other medications, which might be something like gabapentin, which is a pain medication, or other opiates or synthetics.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Swirsky.
Just, so how many people are we serving with this $293,000? I mean, there's direct service, there's also, of course, the social.
Speak in that microphone a little bit.
Could you?
Right. For fiscal year 2018, which ended on June 30th of 2018, we served 19 people under this contract. And the contract does not cover any part of the IBH REACH project. This is just for residential treatment.
And I should note that that's a contract not to exceed amount. So much like with the Oriana, we are billed based upon the people that are referred to IBH. So the number you see there, because I saw everybody starting to do math, which is good. I think that it's important to note that it's a contract not to exceed amount. So some years, which we can get that data for council, you'd be surprised, or maybe not, how expensive in residential treatment is. However, it is based upon billing and based upon use. So the amount of people that are referred, what their particular case is, how long they're staying, whether it's 30, 60, 90 days or more. So it really is, the 19 number doesn't necessarily tell the whole story, but from a fiscal perspective, I think it's important for council to note that the number you see there is the contract amount not to exceed, not necessarily what we get billed for.
And they pay per bed day.
Yep.
It's a certain amount per bed day. So I think, you know, if someone stays there, if all 19 people stayed there on average 100 days each, then you'd get to the amount, you know, of the contract. But we buy a certain number of bed days, and then that can fluctuate how many people are served based on how long they stay.
Right. And are we getting reports about evaluation of effectiveness of the programs? Do they submit reports to you guys? How does, I know there's probably state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would be happy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily, part of what in my response to Councilwoman Sims' question was we felt we needed to do due diligence to make sure that the program was effective, and we feel it is. Definitely IBH has data that they can provide to the committee and to council in terms of what they have on hand. You know, addiction is tough. That's why the outreach program is so important, because, you know, someone can leave after 90 days and feel and be and actually, you know, have the confidence level, the self-efficacy level to feel like they beat it. But the relapse, the issue, depending on the comorbidities that they have, the multiple addictions that are going on, it's tough to say you know, with an easy stat, yes, this program's successful. We feel that the partnership is worth continuing. The municipal court feels like it's worth continuing, and especially given while we are seeing a decrease in overdoses and overdose deaths in Summit County and in Akron, we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. So anything that we can do within the bounds of our budget to provide our courts with alternative pathways, we want to continue to provide, again, based upon our ability in our budget.
Just one quick, are you doing Narcan training too?
Yes.
In the place of residence? Or?
Yeah, we train all of our direct care staff, well, actually, all of our personnel on Narcan, and we've also trained clients on Narcan as well.
Thanks, Councilman. I see Councilwoman Mosley Samples has her hand up.
Thank you. I have a question for you. On your Caring Contacts program, what's your funding source for that? And is it very active? Do you have a lot of the residents that are participating in that and when they leave from residency?
It is staffed by our IBH Reach project personnel, so all of the clients already know these people when they leave treatment. So it's not a stranger calling them, it's somebody that's familiar to them. What we do with the IBH Reach project is actually let people go out and try a volunteer activity with the REACH project before they're discharged from treatment, so they can get a taste of how rewarding it is to do that volunteer work. And then the Caring Contacts come after they've left treatment. It's from people that they know care about them. And, we're training our staff as, what to do if they do happen to have somebody who is expressing suicidal thought.
Okay. Could you send us over some information on that program?
I will.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And I have one question for either James or Sean. I know they said that our funding sources used to treat like 19 people. Can we look at how much in the budget are we using for that? Because it seems like there's a bigger need for residential treatment right now than when you have, I don't want to compare them to any other agencies. I just think that that's something we should be looking at a little closer, the residential treatment and how we're funding it and how much we're giving them. It just seems like 19 is not a lot.
Yeah, and we can absolutely do that, and your point is well taken. Residential treatment is the most effective, and unfortunately it's the most expensive.
Yep.
And so I think we have to see, I know that IBH and others are working, I think, with the city of Barberton on something that's like the partnership we've been able to, but the city of Akron really is the only city that makes this kind of statement for its court system, and we believe strongly in residential treatment. Hopefully, as our budget situation improves, we can do more, but writ large, I hope that, as this body has done numerous times, continue to support reforms beyond our control that allow for other sources of payment for places like IBH and others that do residential treatment to make it more cost effective for our patients and their families.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I see Councilwoman Mobian, her hand up there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to hear you say that you're looking at the issue of suicide because it's so critical, particularly when you start thinking about drug abuse and depression and all the other problems associated with abuse. The thing that's so interesting about the Caring Contacts that people need to know is that they are so simple and things that is being considered cutting-edge contacts that we're having with people. Basically, a telephone call, sending them a card or a letter, something to let them know that someone is thinking about you and someone cares about you. And it's amazing, the kinds of research and the results that we're getting from that. The one thing I wanted to know, and I don't know if you send this information normally, do you send the breakout of who you're servicing with these dollars in terms of female, male, black, whites? Do you keep that kind of data?
We do keep that type of data, and we could send it.
Yeah. Please do.
Okay.
Do these dollars come from fines from the municipal court?
Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe these come from income tax general fund.
General fund?
It's general fund.
Income tax, yeah.
And I know we do things like we've always done them. Is there a reason why this is connected with public safety instead of health and social services?
I believe this is the committee that it's always traditionally come to.
I think you need to rethink that, particularly when you look at the brochure that they just provided us. We need to start thinking about drug abuse as a disease as an illness that should be treated that way and not as some type of criminality associated with it. So just kind of rethink that and see, regardless of who the chair is. I just happen to be the chair, but it should be under Health and Social Services, I believe. So thank you very much. Thank you for the work that you do.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know it's been under public safety since I've been down here, but thanks for raising it now. Councilman Russ Neal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mobian asked my main question. I would like to get if we could get a breakdown of who's served. And I was just trying to peruse through the information that was shared, the youngest age that you may treat?
18.
18? Because I know there's a void with, and I'm hearing this from teachers who are in school a lot, with young people who are, faced with drug addiction, who are homeless, and the amount of, thankfully, they're opening up and sharing the amount of depression and suicidal, thoughts that they're coming up with. And so if this doesn't fit that bill, I think we need to find a way, some other way, to where we find community partners so that we can fill that bill as a community. So if we can get your breakdown of who you serve demographically, the whole bit, so that we can see where we need to fill, who we can partner with to fill the gap. Not only who you serve, but who you partner with as well, because this is going to be one of those village things that we're going to have to
Sounds
address.
good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Councilman. With that, any other questions or comments? We've done.
I love
Councilwoman Sims had her hand up. Sorry, all due respect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, just for point of clarity, are we just paying for beds? So, I guess that's the piece I would like to see us take another gander at, because if you're just saying every year we purchase beds for 19 people, and that's what we're getting is a bed. When I looked at numbers, $20,000, it just seems like our resources should be also looking at some of the other things that they're talking about, because we don't defer them because they needed a bed. We deferred them because they needed treatment.
Right.
And that piece seems to be missing from what we're doing. It just sounds
Sure.
a little.
Maybe some clarification. So when we say purchasing beds, that's sort of the industry way of how these things are handled. But the bed, everything is an all-in price. So what we're buying when we buy a bed space is we're buying everything that IBH does. Mm-hmm. So it's an all-in price. It's just that the unit price is called a bed instead of breaking it out into a more a la carte. So we basically purchase beds to hold space for the municipal court to be able to refer people who are good fits. But what we are essentially buying with that bed is everything that IBH brings.
When she gave the clarification today, I thought there were other resources used to support that other stuff. And so if maybe seeing the data would be helpful to see what we get for.
Okay. Quickly, we're providing individual counseling, group counseling, a lot of education. We provide health services on our property so people can come to triage if they've got a cold or anything else. We have psychiatric services. We have an addictionologist, recreational facilities. So it's the bed day includes all of that.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Sworsky, thank you.
You guys still use the phrase wraparound services? No?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
The patient is there, and there's a variety of services around that person.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to compliment you on this piece about addiction in the brain in the brochure. I used to, it was this summer, with my students in a straightforward and clear way, helps people understand what causes addiction. Appreciate that. Really
Thank you,
well
sir.
written.
Thank you.
Did you write it?
I contributed.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm guessing suspension of the rules is probably the best choice
That would
here.
be great if you're comfortable.
Before I ask for a vote, just to clarification, the judges refer everyone to IBH, correct?
So that is how the referrals are made, correct?
And obviously that's because somehow somebody had some run-in with law enforcement, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So can I get a motion for suspension of the rules?
Motion for suspension of rules.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thanks.
Whenever you're ready, Madam Chair.
Public utilities will start in 2 seconds. 1, 2.
There you go.
Can I get a? You guys are tough. Hey, can I get a motion for approval of our last meeting minutes?
Motion for approval.
Can I get a second? Can I get a second? I guess, are we the only two here?
Yeah, you can. Where'd Kilby go?
Somebody's missing? Where's Kilby?
Who you missing here?
Bob's here.
Kilby.
Oh, here he comes. I have a motion for approval of our last meeting minutes. I need a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have one piece before us. Ordinance ratifying the actions of the Director of Public Service in contacting with H.M. Miller Construction Company, Inc. for the emergency repair of 3 water mains in the city due to extreme winter conditions, authorizing payment therefore and declaring an emergency. Mr. Ludlow?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. We had extremely high number of water main breaks last winter. H.M. Miller took care of these 3 for us. One was on South Street at Grant, which was a 24-inch water main, approximately 60 years old. Then they took care of another one at Carnegie in Manchester, right by the old Young's restaurant. And then they took care of another water main break we had out in Mogador on Cleveland Avenue near James Avenue. So they took care of these 3. The one took them quite a while to fix, the one on Grant South. They had just submitted invoices for these 3 water main breaks last month. We went through them, verified the quantities with our records, and we're asking for passage of this. Consent would be fine.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council? Councilwoman Amobian?
I'm just curious, how are you identifying the water mains that should be repaired? Is this why you're using that equipment?
Unfortunately, the road's caved in on these 3. So Grant and South, I mean, the road just gave way. We had to shut the road down. And the one, it was coming up through the pavement over by Young's Restaurant. And then we received a call from Mogador Road Department that there was a water main break at that intersection. So in the city of Mogador, we take care, our responsibility in their contract is we repair the water mains, like we do in Fairlawn and in Hudson.
Okay.
Talmadge and Stowe, they repair their own.
Don't we have this equipment that you can...
We do. We have the leak detection equipment. Those are the ones where it may be coming up through the pavement or showing maybe in a sewer, but we can't identify directly. But typically a water main break undermines the road, then you see a depression. But we do have leak detection equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ludlow, I know we've talked about this in the past, that, these breaks come. We don't know when they're going to come, but we know we're going to get them. And we could probably estimate how many we're going to get a year based over. So my question is this, in light of, some of the discussion we've had about trying to open up more opportunities for folks within the city of Akron, especially for the minority community, have we had a chance to put anything in place for this year to identify companies that can do maybe at least some of this work, if it's at least opening the hole, closing it, trying to find ways where we can be more inclusive with the work, because we know these are going to happen every year.
Sure. Last year, I believe Canal Construction repaired a few for us. H.M. Miller, obviously, Kenmore Construction, and I think Chaffee repaired some for us, and Spano Brothers replaced something for us, too. We have not had any companies reach out to us recently, but if someone would, we definitely would entertain engaging them when these happen.
Okay. Now, this is in regards to public utilities as well as public service. I think if we had some type of outreach or forum, because I think what's happened to a lot of them is that they've been beaten down. They've tried, and for whatever reason, they haven't had the opportunity to have access to some of these city contracts. But I think if, as we talked about last week, if we're intentional, for whatever happened in the past, whatever, sometimes it's just business as usual because it's easy to pick up and call the folks that you do business with as usual. But since we're going to be intentional to change some of the dynamics and open up some of the opportunities, if we have to create something, we'll have to create something. But I think reaching back out to folks and letting them know that, it's a new day and we're working to create a more equitable procurement opportunity. I think I'm pretty confident we'll find some folks. So
we did do that on a real small scale for the companies that are more geared towards residential.
Yes, sir.
We've included those in when we did our insurance with the water mains, so we have engaged some of those smaller companies to get some of that work, and it's worked out really well for them. On this larger stuff, if you have somebody, please have them contact me, and I'll get them with the water department, and maybe we can start having that conversation.
Okay. And I could do this offline. If we get an idea of what's involved, I mean, like, if the projects are so small to where they have their own dump trucks, if dump trucks are needed, but if there's some bits and pieces, because usually what happens is smaller companies have one piece of it. They may not have all of it, so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent?
Can I get a second? Second. All in favor? Okay, consent has it. If we have nothing else coming before us, we are adjourned.